Welcome to Music and Medicine on Monday, a collaboration between the College of Medicine and the School of Music here at the University of Iowa. This podcast is designed to help musicians play and to stay healthy. Today's session is focused on the embouchure and wind instruments, more specifically playing the trombone after cleft lip repair. This video is supplemented by more written material online through the Iowa Protocols, a free medical website that you can find that resource on the QR code or the website displayed. We're coming to you from the recital hall in the Voxman building at the University of Iowa. My name is Harry Hoffman. I'm a physician at the University of Iowa, and our featured performer today is Killian Ritlin. He's a student in the School of Music focused on trombone with a plan to make a career out of trombone playing. Our guests today are John Kennedy, Professor Emeritus at the University of Iowa Departments of Otolaryngology and Plastic Surgery, and a former bass player, card-carrying member of the Iowa Musicians Union. Also, we have Jonathan Allen, Professor of Trombone at the University of Iowa. So Killian, can you tell us a little bit about your background that led you to this point, establishing a career centered around music in general and more specifically the trombone?
Absolutely, and was very lucky to be born into a fairly musical family. Father played the tenor saxophone when he went to Iowa here many years ago. Played in the jazz bands, did marching band, and just kind of was around that my whole life growing up. And I knew at some point I was going to play an instrument, and I convinced myself, when you get to that point in 5th grade, it's going to be saxophone. And I was like, and I played that trombone, and that slide was just too fun. And I just haven't left it ever since. And originally they told me there might be some issues with the cleft palate and lip and palate and the playing, but I just kept trucking, and I've gotten here, went through high school, and decided about during COVID, I found myself, I was like, I actually enjoy practicing and playing all the time. And I reached out to Dr. Allen and realized that I wanted to do this full time. So, I'm very, very lucky to be born in such a perfect area of medicine to fix me and music to heal the soul. So I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
Terrific. Killian, can you describe the first piece you'll be playing and why you chose it?
Yeah, so I picked Amazing Grace, just the very classic hymn you may know from church or from wherever, mostly because I, as a student here at the university, am primarily a classical trombonist, but I participate a lot in the jazz department as well. And hymns kind of speak to both sides of my playing, so I thought that was the kind of the best use. But Amazing Grace is very meaningful to me. So
terrific. We're looking forward to the performance. So Jonathan, as Killian's mentor, can you comment on his great performance, but maybe also talk about your colleagues around the country that had told you perhaps you shouldn't take on someone to become a trombonist that's had cleft lip surgery?
Yeah. First of all, Killian, fantastic job. Some really beautiful playing. And really stylistically appropriate, yes, but just really wonderful to hear, making a great sound, full resonant sound from a technical trombone standpoint, and then getting around the instrument in a really successful way. It was expressive and touching as well. So really beautiful playing. Dr. Hoffman referred to when Killian first came to me and we met prior to his audition. I had never worked with a student that had cleft palate repair, and I didn't know if there would be differences or challenges that they would face that maybe a more typical student wouldn't. So I reached out to some colleagues here, but also colleagues throughout the country, and pretty much everybody gave me the same answer, that it's not going to be worth your time. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be too hard. And some people said, if they want to be a band director, it's maybe fine. But none of those answers sat well with me. And just talking and working with Killian a little bit, he seemed to have a really good attitude. He wanted to work. He already had a lot of musical understanding, a lot of experience, and I thought that his ceiling was much higher than maybe what other people thought, sight unseen. So over the last couple of years, it's been really just amazing to see him grow and blossom musically and be able to find avenues for his creative expression. He's one of the most active performers in the trombone studio and has been for years. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but in the near future, we'll be entering life as a full-time performing musician. Mm-hmm. And I love when any of my students are able to get jobs, whether it's being an elementary school band director, high school band director, college professor, full-time performer, orchestra musician, whatever, military musician. I'm just thrilled with that. But when people have had significant challenges, it makes it so much more meaningful. And I know at least some of the challenges that Killian's dealt with just physically. And it's just thrilling, and it's really fulfilling for me to see, and I'm just really excited for him.
That's terrific. So, John, a little over 2 decades ago, you started on a series of procedures for Killian, and I know you have some visuals as well. Do you want to describe what a cleft lip is all about and how you've gone through things?
And I think a picture's worth 1,000 words here, and Killian was nice enough to provide this. So I think, this picture very accurately represents where things started. And as you can see on this, there is a failure of formation of the upper lip, basically. And the upper lip, when Killian was born, instead of being one continuous structure, was divided into 3 structures, one on each side and one in the middle. Now, as it turns out, all the component parts are there. They're just rearranged in a disordered way. So the surgery fundamentally, strategically, is to loosen up all the attachments where they're abnormally running and reorient them and recreate the complete upper lip with a muscular sling. So if you think about your upper lip, it's really directionally 3 components. There's skin on the outside, there's muscle in the middle, and there's several different orientations of that muscle. And then there's a mucosa layer on the back that is moist and slick. So if you stick your tongue up under your upper lip, you'll be on the mucosal back layer. The muscle you don't really see because it's contained inside, and then the skin on the top. So in any event, patients can be born with a cleft lip alone, a cleft palate alone, both a lip and a palate. They can be complete or incomplete. Not every cleft involves both sides of the lip or the palate. So there's really a lot of different sort of permutations and combinations that can happen with the presentation of cleft lip and palate.
We're going to be talking a little bit about the palate later, but with respect to the lip, how many operations does it usually take to get the lip and its supporting understructure intact?
Right. So it's a different journey for every patient because, it's when you start to rearrange things, sometimes you have to do that in stages. Sometimes you can complete the whole thing at once. My goal when I operated on these kids was to minimize the operations, especially when they were young, so that you put less scar in the ultimate repair, because the scar will not function as well as muscle. And as you know, and I know, every time you go in on a surgical endeavor to correct something, one of the things you leave behind is scar. So you have to kind of pick your battles a little bit when you're doing cleft repair, because there's always the opportunity to touch things up or adjust something or do something. But especially when the kids are younger, for a whole lot of reasons, I think you have to go into it that this is a marathon, not a sprint. If you think of what's transpired between that picture and this, and particularly the performance, I think the amazing thing to me, the thing that I got out of being in this kind of business, was watching these kids grow up. And there were superstars that came out of the Cleft Clinic, and Killian certainly is one. And I think, though, this segment is about music and medicine, but to me, what it's really about is just perseverance and overcoming challenges. And I think, whether who's ever watching this ever picks up a musical instrument or ever picks up a trombone, I think what, really comes across to me loud and clear up here is that, despite advice to the contrary, despite, thinking that it's going to be a little different to get into a trombone or other instrument that requires prolonged breath support, it can be done. And I think that's what this is all about. Everybody faces challenges in life. Nobody has the same ones. But the people that are successful and I think happier are the ones that persevere and persist and take those as challenges, but not insurmountable obstacles.
Terrific. At what age do you generally do the lip repair?
So the lip, again, there's not an exact perfect date to do it for everybody. The bilateral lips I would do when they were a little bit older, because the kid is just a little bit bigger, and that translates to additional volume of tissue to work with, less tension on the repair. A lot of different factors kind of line up. If you can, have cooperative parents and everybody's kind of, singing from the same songbook, you can twist and tweak the system to get, I think, the best results on an individual timing basis. But typically the lip would be done sometime between 6 and 12 months, and then the palate would be done sometime between 12 months and a year.
So it's my understanding that there's all sorts of considerations that you don't see beyond the lip, which are important, such as feeding as an infant and having a team involved.
Right.
You have a pretty good team at Iowa.
Right. We had there is a fantastic team at Iowa. And I think I misspoke. I said a year or 12 months, a year to 18 months on the palate. The team is very important because there are challenges beyond just the soft tissue, beyond just the lip, beyond the palate. There's bony impacts. Obviously, there's missing bone in a picture like that. There may or may not be missing teeth. Speech can be a little bit of a challenge to get as, perfect as possible. And so having dedicated speech therapists to work with, and as you know, we've had for years, before us at Iowa, there were great people in all of those areas on the Cleft team, and that I think is how you take a beginning like this and come up with an end result like we have sitting on stage with us.
So my understanding, it's been a 2-decade plus process for Killian that has included bone grafting to fill in the defect to support the lip, and even dental considerations. Can you talk about the bone grafting?
Yeah, so there's a missing bone in the upper lip, and that's important for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's important for support if you're going to do something like this, but it's important to have that up there to have dental restorations done as well. And there's, again, a lot of different types of dental restorations that can be done, but all of those do better if there's a complete bony arch of the upper jaw.
What age does the bone graft typically?
It depends on. I keep hedging these answers, and I'm honestly not trying to do that. But it depends on the kid's dental development. So traditionally, you would like to have the front teeth to the side, the lateral incisor erupted or at least erupting, and you would like to get that bone in there before the canine or the pointy tooth comes out, because those teeth by eruption will bring some bone down, but you don't want the teeth to erupt into an unstable situation, because then you can lose those teeth.
Great. Well, Killian, can you describe some of the adaptations that you have made, maybe on your own or with some guidance from Jonathan?
Absolutely. I mean, Dr. Allen has been it's hard to show as much gratitude as I feel towards Dr. Allen, what you've done for me as a player, and more importantly, as a person to, that perseverance piece that we talked about is incredibly important, but if I hadn't been given a chance to persevere, I wouldn't be able to have that same gratitude. So I firstly want to say thank you, and thank you to you as well, Dr. Kennedy, for all the wonderful work you did, because that is absolutely part of the puzzle. I would say the adaptations on a technical level, while maybe I can't vocalize them or say them in all the nice scientific ways. For example, we're kind of talking about embouchure, the way that our face kind of is in contact with in my case, a mouthpiece. For other folks, it might be a mouthpiece with a reed, but for me, it's metal. But I mean, Dr. Allen, you have seen me, kind of come in from where I was in high school up until now. Are there any adaptations you saw from me? Because it's a little harder for me, maybe on my end, to kind of know.
One of the things we first discovered early on, if you remember, with the repair, at least the way that Killian's was repaired, without really an upper lip, if I understand correctly, Dr. Kennedy, they kind of turn the upper lip out to create an upper lip. So compared to a more typical upper lip, the part of the lip that would be vibrating on the upper side for Killian is different, a different part of the muscle. As a result, you can see he's 80% lower lip, 20% upper lip. There's a bit of a misnomer for brass playing that both upper and lower lips are kind of equally yoked in the workload. And sometimes that's the case, but it's almost better for a lot of people to think about kind of flattening the chin or pulling the muscles here down. And the lower lip creates a firm surface that the upper lip is free to vibrate again. So maybe compare more to like a saxophone or an oboe, or saxophone or clarinet mouthpiece with a hard mouthpiece and a reed, as opposed to like an oboe or bassoon, which has two reeds that vibrate equally. So with the way that Killian's upper lip is constructed, that's not really possible. So a lot of what we do is upside down. So small things like when you go into the high range, typical brass players will need to blow downward. Killian needs to blow upward. In the low range, we blow up, he needs to blow down. So everything's flip-flop because the workload is upside down. So that was that one, it took me a little while for my brain to to figure out what was happening here.
I understand you have a prop that you might be able to show this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe can we zoom in on the prop?
Yeah, so yes. I don't even know the name of this.
It's just called a mouth.
Yeah. Let's start with Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jonathan, why don't you just show us what
absolutely.
you described blowing up and blowing down.
Okay.
You zoom in to...
Yeah, so this is a mouthpiece, or just the rim from a mouthpiece is called an embouchure visualizer. It allows you or a teacher to see into the center of the aperture. If you were to play high, the jaw kind of comes back a little bit to facilitate blowing downward. And the airstream kind of goes downward. Going into low range, the jaw kind of comes down and almost like slides a little bit forward, which helps facilitate blowing upward. And there's no instrument, so I can't do all the same things because the physics aren't right. But that's kind of like the basic motion between those two.
Great. And can you maybe, Killian, are you comfortable showing
certainly.
how you've adapted? You want to use this device?
That's fine.
I didn't clean it. I rubbed it on the hands a little bit.
I've had worse. I'm sure it'll be fine, but for the sake of demonstration, I certainly can. So So one of the biggest things we talked about that I've worked with other folks is that when the way my embouchure sits is this top of the mouthpiece actually sits very low. Since we kind of talked about how my bottom lip is so much more prominent, I like to say it's prominent and dominant when it comes to playing because it does a lot of the work, right? So maybe when you see from the angle that Dr. Allen had, that it was fairly equal versus me, my natural position would be about right here, where you can see much more prominence of the lower lip as well as like even part of the, of the chin down here.
In a perfect world, you would have somewhere between, if there were like a Cartesian grid, somewhere between 50-50 top and bottom to 60% on top, 40% on bottom. Killian's more like 70-30. Yeah.
But you're still getting 30, a tribute to Dr. Kennedy's work,
exactly.
that you got that 30 to work with.
And what is interesting, though, about that upper lip is it does tire much more quickly than the bottom lip. We have worked through a lot of injuries, particularly to my upper lip from overplaying, where it'll be something as simple as, a marching band weekend or something where, we're playing for, in the building for the fans, and then we go to the stadium, and then we're playing in the stands, and it's just all this overwork. And I'll actually get like legitimate damage to the upper lip, and if it's overworked, it'll actually start bleeding because it is so overworked, but it never happens to the bottom. So I have to be very careful and manage if I overplay, for example, or play too much within a day. It's not the most pretty sight, but when I come home, I take a bowl and I fill it with ice and water. I just dunk my face right in the water and just let it rest and kind of relax it. Vitamin E as well. Vitamin E paste on the lips tends to be a helpful alternative as well. But that upper lip gets overworked a lot. So it's finding ways of taking breaks while practicing, since we're talking about adapting, is, you're going to have to take more frequent breaks than you would like to, especially me because I'm pretty impatient. I just want to go, go, go. But those, I would say, as far as, this center of playing goes, those are kind of the biggest adaptations. And some of the big ones we Dr. Allen taught me, and I'm very grateful for, are, when we are holding the horn right, as we just kind of saw from my playing, I might be holding it a little bit more down. You might see marching band folks are lifting up high, and that doesn't work for me very well, since this lower lip is doing most of the heavy lifting. But what's interesting is throughout the ranges, as Dr. Allen was talking about, with the way that my air moves up and down, it's sometimes easier for me with my left hand that I'm holding the horn with to physically move the horn rather than my face in the mouthpiece for different ranges. So if I, for example, holding it like this, sometimes if I'm going into the lower range, I will sometimes, instead of doing this, because we don't want to tilt the head down because it creates so much tension in my throat, I'll instead turn the horn up a little bit, and so my airstream is more direct, so I can hit my lower notes. And when I get in that upper register, I can kind of start to turn it down, so my bell starts to go down, and so I can get a little bit tighter of a seal for the high range. So those were some of the things that we worked out, and it was kind of trial and error. There's a lot of things that worked spectacularly, and other things that I just couldn't play, like even lifting the mouthpiece doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. So
it's my understanding that you actually have a large mouthpiece?
I do, yes.
Do you want to compare your two instruments?
Yes, so
we'll start. There's not a lot of research on brass playing and the cleft palate repair. The one research that has been done is linked on the Iowa Protocols page. And in that study, they found that, or observed that basically the larger the mouthpiece, the better for people that have had cleft palate repair surgery. So trombone, tuba would be more forgiving for the surgeries and the scar tissue that exist in the smaller mouthpieces like trumpet or French horn. So this looks, if somebody saw this trombone, because it doesn't have the valve section that a typical classical or orchestral trombone has, somebody might see that and think that that's like a jazz trombone, and Killian did play jazz on it, but it's actually we call it a large bore orchestral trombone just without the valve section. And that is, that purchase was made because Even with a really open valve like mine, there's a right angle right here that creates some back pressure. The extra metal changes the physics of the instrument. So we got the most open tenor trombone we could find. And then on that, it's not the largest mouthpiece that you can get, although we might be looking that way long term.
Yeah.
But it is a larger mouthpiece than Killian was playing before.
Yeah, the larger mouthpieces have always worked better for me on my other instruments I play. 4Gs are a little bit more comfortable for me, larger. So, and I also play bass trombone as well. And we noticed almost immediate results that was more comfortable in certain ranges. So
even before we were aware of the surgery, Killian played sousaphone in the hockey marching band, and we observed that he didn't have all the throat pain. And he didn't have as much overuse issues when he was playing sousaphone. He wanted to stick with the trombone as his primary instrument, so we needed to kind of find a way around that. So there was an opportunity a year ago to try bass trombone and had immediately great results. So we thought, okay, how can we recreate this on the tenor trombone? And so far, it seems to be working pretty well.
yeah.
So, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the orbicularis oris is the muscle that's surrounding the embouchure. And there's something called Satchmo syndrome after Louis Armstrong, where people can have overuse or without warming up, having difficulties with that muscle and actually have little tears in the muscle.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that some have operated on those tears. And with your concept about creating more scarring, it may not be an ideal thing to do. Do you want to comment on the orbicularis?
Yeah, I mean, the orbicularis is a muscle that, is responsible for a lot of different functions. And in facial expression, oral competence, so you're not, drooling and when you drink something. It's interesting. It's divided up into different parts. So there's a pars marginalis that's supposed to run mostly under the red part of your lip, and then the other part of that muscle, runs higher up above the red part of the lip. It's not a distinct difference in appearance when you're actually dissecting it out, but you do try to orient those a little bit differently. Again, just in every attempt you can take to improve the function of the muscle overall. But like any muscle, it can fatigue, it can get overworked. It's just a muscle that is, I suppose, also you would know better than me, but conditioning can improve the overall performance and the overall capacity.
Right, Jonathan, you mentioned micro tears occurring in the course of using your embouchure.
Yeah, everyone who's played a brass instrument has gotten to the point where things hurt or they stop kind of working really well. Usually the first time people encounter that is marching band in high school, when they have 2-a-days, which I think is next week here in Iowa. And so they have 2 or 3 rehearsals in one day, and that's just too much playing for brass players. Yeah. So I think there's not money in researching, trombone stuff, right? No one's going to make a lot of money doing this, but it seems like 2.5 to 4 hours at the most of playing in a single day is really the max of what anybody should be doing. And often we're having young players coming off their summer where they're not doing a lot, and then all of a sudden they're thrust into 6+ hours of playing, and it's just a recipe for physical issues.
So like a sports participant, when you look at your students that come in as freshmen through seniors, do you see a real ramping up of their endurance? I mean, obviously their technique improves and all those other things, but just straight up endurance, does that change a lot?
Yeah, we see it, and I see it every fall. Everyone's summers look different. Some people are doing traveling, some people are, I've had a student who the last couple of summers has been a full-time touring musician, performing musician, so his endurance is great when he comes back. Some people, the first week of school, their embouchure is just completely wasted from marching band camp. So usually by the first week of October, everyone's in pretty good shape. But the people that have worked consistently through the summers, after that first year, I think people are in pretty good shape usually by their sophomore year.
Well, terrific. Well, thank you, Killian, Jonathan, and John, for a great performance and discussion. Additional detail regarding this and other episodes of Music and Medicine on Monday can be accessed by visiting the Iowa protocols or looking at the QR code displayed or website address below, or simply searching the web for Iowa Protocols, Music and Medicine on Monday.